Hi, Misha here, and earlier this year I did a three-part series looking at the rifles of the Bundeswehr, Cold War and post-Cold War. And in that video, some expressed interest in seeing a review of the P-series pistols and kind of what's going on there. And about a year ago, I did a video where the Walther PDP here was adopted as the Bundeswehr's new P14, not to mention P210K compact remodel. And then a little bit more recently, showed off this gun, the Heckler Koch P8A1, when some of these came into the country. And I've had a lot of fun with it. And when I did this video, there was rampant speculation about the Bundeswehr finally replacing it after 30 years. Since that time, it seems like, although it's not been made 100% official, it's 90%, that this gun will replace it. The CZ P210, or at least a version of it. Maybe with the optics cut, this one doesn't have it, but full-size grip, full-size 4.5 or 5-inch barrel. We'll get there. We're going to talk about that. How this is presumably the new P13. But, you know, that's going to make a really long video, so I'm going to break this up into two. And we're going to go back and talk about the beginning of the police and the military in West Germany, the BGS, the Bundesgrenzschutz, and the Bundeswehr, the BW. How the P1 to P2, all that, up through the P7 happened. It's a pretty clear timeline. And then in video 2, we'll pick back up with the P8 and go all the way through the P14 here. How's that sound? Seems pretty even to me. Now again, I'm doing this video because some requested it, especially on Patreon. So if you'd like to help support us and maybe kind of request videos, go over there and check it out. Bucking up a month, whatever you can do. But if you can't, understood. Liking, sharing, subscribing, commenting. I love commenting. You can do that, guys, because it's still shockingly warm out here, believe it or not. Ridiculous for end of September. But with that, if you can help, I appreciate it. And also check out the earlier Bundeswehr videos. So I guess we'll do kind of part 1 of part 2 and go from there. Alright, let's try the P38 alloy frame. Decocker is on, so there we go. Start off in the double action mode. Held open. Okay, we're going to go a little bit out of chronological order because while the initial proofage for handguns acceptable in terms of safety, reliability, dependability, accuracy, all that for the German police, later to be expanded to the BGS, the Bundesgrenzschutz, and the Bundeswehr, the army. The system was set up in 1950, but the P names really weren't given until 1956, 1957, so they were kind of retroactive. And so while the P1 here is the first in the name, the model itself came really kind of third or fourth, depending how you look at it. This is an earlier version made actually in France, at least officially, by Manurhin, although, you know, the partnership with Walther, we've talked about that. That's because after World War II, obviously, West Germany could not make guns. It wouldn't be relaxed until 1955, and then the new Walther factory in Ulm opened in 57, and this would be one of their launch pistols. But let's backtrack just a minute. Like I said, the standards and everything were established in 1950. 1951, really at the behest of NATO, West Germany initialized the BGS, the Bundesgrenzschutz, the border guard. Originally, it was just to be a police entity, paramilitary, 10,000 men, but it would soon grow to triple and even more. Of course, there would still be the local and state police, the Landespolizei, and there would be a federal police agency, but no military yet. In the very, very beginning, the BGS would be equipped with kind of surplus World War II P38, so steel-framed guns. Not a bad fit. It was quite a modern gun. They got a lot of these left over from France. There you go. The P1 here, really, when it was put into production and would be adopted by the Bundeswehr in 1957, although the name P would not start to be stamped on them until 1963, the big difference was the aluminum alloy frame to lighten it up and cheapen things up. They also did some things with the barrel to make it easier to mass produce. But of course, it still had the same single double action system with decocker safety, same heel mag release with 8 shots, lanyard loop on the left side. Interestingly, the polymer grips it used were kind of a harkening back to the original HP from 1938, 1939, 1940. There you go. And the design, well, Walther would make about 500,000 of these during the Cold War era, and it would change a bit. The one there, the Menirhen one, I've had for a bit, but this one I've actually had for a very long time. I picked it up at the store as a surplus gun. It's a much later 1979 dated example. The Bundeswehr was still getting them then. Goes to show you some of the things. They put the heavier slide in. They would also put the hex pin in the frame in the 70s. The heavier slide would come in the 60s. They would update the sights on some models. We've done a whole video kind of looking at these, talking about the updates. They're small but important, just to give it a better life. And some police would also use these, but that wasn't their main gun, especially not in the 1950s. Managed not to get slide bite. Successful. One reason you see a lot of surplus PPs on the market is because, especially the municipal, the really local police, not to mention the state police, they relied on the PP in 7.65 Browning, 32 Auto. They didn't really go for the 380, the 9mm curves as much, but yeah, they mostly also used the longer barrel PP with the 8-shot mag. Some did have the PPK, and there were even some that used the PPKS when it came along in the 70s. But in the 1950s, this was considered perfectly adequate for a police officer walking the beat in an urban area. Keep in mind, this wasn't the Wild West. Range was quite close. And frankly, body armor, things like that, it just didn't really happen. Plus, you know, they're still kind of arming themselves back up. So this would be the standard, more or less, in guns like it on a more local level, with some surplus P38s and of course later P1s on the military level with the Bundeswehr, and the BGS would have some, and some of the more federal police agencies, customs, what have you. It's smooth, I'll give it that. The P2. This is not a P2, but it's close. This is a Sig P210-1, early 210-2. The P2 was the name given to the P210-4. Actually very similar to this, high gloss blued finish, wood serrated grips, single action, though excellent trigger, early style release with the flat panel, pretty much early style features. Yeah, the only differences between the -1, -2 and the -4, which would have been again the P2, this did not have the lanyard staple, and it had a loaded chamber indicator up here, very similar to its initial predecessor, the French SACM, SACM 1935A, both still in 9mm parabellum, which of course later would evolve into 9mm NATO. Yeah, in 1951, the West German government would order 5,000 of these from Sig in Switzerland for the nascent Bundesgrenzschutz, the BGS. Keep in mind, in the beginning, it was only 10,000 men, so, yeah. Were they expensive? Yeah, they were. But it was the advantage of Switzerland being a neutral nation, kind of keeping West Germany's position. Plus, there were some regulations about where and when equipment could come from with the terms of agreement with the Soviet. Keep in mind, this is pre-Berlin Wall, post-Berlin airlift, so the Cold War is definitely heating up, but Korea is just getting going. Things aren't as bad as they're going to get by 1962 or thereabouts. So buying 5,000 of these from Switzerland made sense. New guns giving the BGS something cool. The accuracy, the reliability, the durability. It was just the price point plus not made here. So right at the same time, they went a wholly different direction. 100. Held up. This is the P3, Pistol 3. The Spanish-made Astra model 600, sometimes called the 600/43. And I've done a full video on this in the past. I love the story behind this and how Spain did them. Essentially, though, during World War II, they reworked their standard Astra 400, A, to fire the German 9x19 cartridge versus the 9mm Largo that Spain was using, but B, also to give it more of a German-style mag catch, the heel style they wanted, lanyard loop the way they wanted, slightly shorter barrel, slightly lighter design. And they did ship a few thousand of these to Germany during the war, but very quickly the war, of course, came to an end, and that was that. But they were making these, and the Third Reich had actually paid for a good number of these. So they had tens of thousands just sitting over in Spain, kind of chilling their heels. And so West Germany thought we could use those for the police, the BGS, what have you. It's a straight blowback gun, which is quite interesting for full power. There's no delayed action. It's, you know, not a locked breech in any way. It just has a very heavy slide and barrel assembly. This was sometimes called a pipe wrench with a strong spring. It does have a grip safety. It does have a manual safety here, which also doubles as a bit of a lock on all that. You can use it as a bolt hold open. And the single action trigger is fine. It's long and a little heavy, a little stiff, but smooth. Not bad for a police or paramilitary gun. And again, you got the kind of unique mag catch here. And of course, in the beginning, the Germans thought, well, you know, we already bought and paid for these, essentially set up the production lines, ship them over to us. And then Spain basically retorted back, no, that was the Third Reich, that was Nazi Germany that paid for these. You're West Germany, you're the Federal Republic. You didn't buy these. So basically, they kind of got them between a rock and a hard place. Either they had to say, oh no, we're the same government, new name, which means they're admitting to being associated with the Nazis, or we're a totally different government, therefore we had no rights to pay for these essentially abandoned guns. In the end, in 1951, they simply just, you know, paid for them.
Oh, I'm flinching really bad. Locked open.
And they acquired a lot. Spain made 59,000 of this model. 45,000 would ultimately go to West Germany. I'm rounding. And of those, over 30,000 would go to the BGS and associated agencies. The rest would go to police and just kind of reserve. They really had more than they needed. Even though Spain was actually charging them for these, the price was significantly cheaper than the P2 over there. So, yeah, it worked out pretty well for them. And so this would be pretty much a de facto standard gun throughout West Germany, be it the BGS, local police, federal police needing something a little more powerful, again, 9x19 Parabellum. And when the Bundeswehr was established in 1956, this would be their first handgun. Yeah, they were getting ready for the P38, P1, but they weren't up and running yet. Walther was just going. So a lot of these are transferred from BGS stocks and other government stocks to them, and they would serve the P3 as the de facto standard. It also should be kept in mind that nearly a third of the initial members of the Bundeswehr came from the BGS. A lot of cross-pollination there, and even a lot of those guys originally were veterans of the Wehrmacht in World War II. Hey, knowledge is knowledge, don't shake it. This would actually be quite a standard in the Bundeswehr until 1961 or thereabouts, at which time they would kind of retire the P3 from the Bundeswehr. They had enough other pistols, namely the P38K by this point. However, the BGS and several police agencies would continue to use these through the late 60s, even into the 70s, and as a bit of an emergency standard because, well, in 1972, there was a tragic Munich massacre, which, woke a lot of people up. My pinky's just going to kind of go down, I guess. Of course, no manual release. Just got to drop the mag and do that. But that back to the PP and its 32 caliber projectile. Again, it was fine in the 1950s, but by the 1970s, you had much more ruthless, much better funded, much better equipped terrorist groups, and really they were mostly communist, red factions coming about that thought that Bolshevism was a great deal. Spoiler, it's not. But they were starting to wear some types of body armor and carry more potent weapons. This just wasn't cutting it anymore and wasn't giving the police the firepower they needed. Kind of what happened in America in the 1920s and early 1930s when a lot of police officers were carrying little .38 revolvers. Even some had their old .32s. So, by 1973, 74, new requirements were being set out by the police. The military was perfectly well equipped with the P1. Some P3s would kind of stick around where needed, but we need something more potent. And Walther's first offering, well, now how was that?
Man, I love that gun. That is sweet, man.
You are so full of shit.
The first tack that West Germany, the police, took was not to go to 9x19 Parabellum at the outset. Rather, they went to an intermediate cartridge, 9x18 Police. Essentially, this goes back to World War II. It was called 9x18 Ultra. The Luftwaffe kind of tested it. Germany never really cared for 380 9mm curves, 9x17 during the war. They used some, had some benefits, but it wasn't quite enough of an improvement over 32 7.65 to make it worth it, plus feeding reliability. As I'm sure you know, Russia went with 9x18 Makarov, kind of based on the same research, and that was thought to be pretty much the most powerful cartridge that can reasonably be fired, not accounting the Astra 600 because it's so big and heavy, out of something still relatively small, light, and cheap to produce. So Walther, in 1973, started off with their PP here and upscaled it for the new 9x18 police cartridge, and we get the PP Super. Pretty much the same features as the PP. Single, double action. It is a straight blowback gun. Like the PPK, it has a last round holdback. Unlike them, it has a slide release now. It also has a decocker only safety system, not hold down. So that's a bit of an update, and it's quite a bit larger. It's about 28 ounces. It's a all steel gun, no real alloy, meant for durability. It's got a overall length just under 7 inches, a barrel just over 3.5 inches. They kind of wanted it to be a little big and heavy because that 9x18 police cartridge on a straight blowback gun, if it were too light, it would be unpleasant and too slow to get back on target. So it's not heavy, but it's not light. This is what they offered by 1974 to the German police and their choice of cartridge. And about 2,000 were sold to various local, state, federal police. Numbers are a little unclear. Full production numbers are unclear on these. I do know for a fact that actually, of all things, New York police tried these out in America. And Walther did show the PP Super in their catalog up until 1979. And there is a rare version in 380 9mm Kurs, 9x17, but this one's in 9x18. Good luck getting ammo. No Makarov ammo will not work in it. The bullet's too wide, too big of a diameter. It does have a push-button mag release, though. That's pretty cool. It was a step. And there were a few other designs. The new at the time, 1975, Sig Sauer conglomeration would offer a version of the P230 in 9x18. And I believe Mauser and Heckler Koch themselves offered a version. But very soon, 1975, 1976, it was decided that, you know, the idea was there, but we're still just a blowback gun. Yeah, it's simple, a little bit cheaper, but the recoil and everything. And we really just want to have that commonality of the 9x19 cartridge and the extra power and punch and flexibility. So they decide, you know, thanks but no thanks on the 9x18. Walther, though, they kind of took the lessons here, and this led to their next offering. Let's load her up again. And the next in our official P series, the P4 from Walther. As far as I know, that's its only name. This came out in 1974, 1975, and if it looks like a P38, more specifically a P1, it really is. It uses the same lightweight aluminum frame. Fun fact, though, this is, as far as I know, the first version, at least as a standard, to feature the reinforcing hex pin. It has a barrel that's about a ½ inch shorter. It also has the wider dot front sight that would be carried over to some late production P38 P1s. It has an adjustable rear sight. Notice on the top, though, it doesn't have the plate. That was always kind of a weaker point, the stamp plate on the P38 P1, so they get rid of it. They also get rid of the loaded chamber pin. They bobbed the hammer for a little bit more compactness. And they gave it the decocker-only safety from the PP Super here. And just kind of generally, you know, mimic the size and weight, about 28 ounces. So a slightly modernized, slightly cheaper, but also more reliable, more dependable, a little bit more concealable version of the P1. Still takes the same 8-round mag with full-size grip, same grip panels, same lanyard, staple. Yeah, this was an intermediate, just like the PP Super, and they would not make many of these, around 7,500. And of those, and it gets a little iffy, between 53 and 6,500 would go to German police agencies, also some to the BGS, and some to German customs, and some would be sold commercially. Some sources say as few as 500, some say as many as 2,000. It's a little vague. This would remain in Walther's catalog up until about 1981, but I doubt they were actually making new ones that late. They're probably just getting rid of their stock. Of course, it is in 9x19, just like a P38 P1. And as far as I know, the Bundeswehr never had any of these. Notice there's this oval cutout. That's actually where the original police symbol was. Over here in America, we do have some surplus P4s. I've seen a handful in my life, but they usually deface the marking there. There are some commercial ones. They're marked P38 Roman numeral 4. Oh, by the way, it does have a rib trigger. sometimes called the target trigger by Walther. A little bit of grippiness. There's also some export points because of the Gun Control Act in America, but these did have them anyway. Yeah, it just shows that step, and this is honestly one of my favorite guns I have because I found it while on a trip, work/vacation down in Houston at Collector's Firearms like 15 years ago. But it's a cool intermediate step and a really compact gun, but not as compact as they could get. Walther would make the myth from World War II a reality with the P38K. These would hit the market around 1975, 1976. Now, in World War II, there were some bobbed barrel P38s. This was not done at the factory, not outside of maybe testing. Maybe some military units did them on a local level. Chances are they're kind of fantasy guns done in America in the 50s, 60s, what have you. But this is basically a P4 with a short barrel. Everything is the same, decocker only, no notch on the top. This does have more of a phosphate finish versus the blued. But mainly it's just got the shorter barrel. It's about 2.5 inches. Notice that the front sight is moved to the slide now. And that's why we have a fully drift adjustable rear sight to make up for that. And these will stay in the catalog about the same amount of time as the P4. And Walther would only make a few thousand. I've seen 2,500 to 3,500. Take it as you will. Some were sold commercially here, not many though. These were used sometimes by border guards, border police. They were used by GSG 9 in limited numbers. Basically, it was an early way to have a 9mm. It was a proven design, double single action, while other things are going. And it is compact on this thing. If they'd only found a way to slim it up on the sides, but mainly the grip. I think they missed a trick there. I get keeping grip and mag compatibility is a positive, but yeah, if they'd gone to a 6-round mag and shortened this up by 1/2 inch or 3/4 of an inch, I think it really would have helped the gun, but they didn't. It is kind of cool. It points and feels really good with the alloy frame. These two would have the hex pin and all that good fun stuff. Yeah, the P38K saw limited federal, police, border guard use, and even a few special forces units within the Bundeswehr would get these. Kind of keep that in mind for the next video, P38K, because even at this time, especially counterterrorism, they need it as compact as possible. But wouldn't it be cool if there was enough barrel to mount a suppressor? But again, next video. In 1976, we move into the next chapter, and this really is about the police, be it the local, the municipal, the state, the federal, the BGS2, criminal investigations, that kind of thing. The Bundeswehr, again, is perfectly happy. They're still actually getting new P1s with the updated frame and slide and all that. Cool. So Walther is doing really well. They're kind of the preeminent maker in Germany, but they do have competition. Yeah, as I already said, they decided by 1975 they were going to go with the 9x19 cartridge, which is pretty much becoming standardized throughout NATO very soon in the next few years for everyone. Makes sense to me. But the P1, it's fine, but it's not really what the police want. So they lay out some requirements for the next round of trials. And it's going to be interesting because pretty much whoever passes the requirements and passes the testing, both on paper and in the field, they're going to be approved, and then individual police agencies can decide which one they want. Requirements include, it basically needs to be lightweight and compact enough, easy to draw from a holster. It needs to be able to carry around in the chamber safely, i.e. a decocker and, firing pin block safety, essentially. It needs to be able to hit a target out to at least 25 meters. 50 would be better, but, reasonable accuracy and power. Basic size they lay out is 7.1 inches by 5.1 inches, length and height. Weight needs to be around 28 ounces, so, under that. Really, it would be better if it were under 1 kilo, so cool. we'll go from there. And it's going to go through some extensive testing and trials. There's going to be a 10,000 round endurance test. And of those, 500 rounds are going to be like rapid fire. Boom, boom, boom. And 4 companies submit. Walther, Heckler Koch, Sig Sauer, and Mauser. And to no one's surprise, Walther's submission, the P5, passes. And this might look like an all-new gun. Design-wise, it is. But it's still a P38P1 with the locking breech system. Just has a highly reworked slide. You actually see elements of the P4 and P38K. I do love the multi-control where it works as both the slide drop and decocker. I think that's cool. One thing that the West Germans said that they would like to see would be ambi controls, but it wasn't a hard requirement, so that's why it's just on the left, not on the right. But no other real external controls. We do have a bobbed hammer. This thing meets the target weight of 28 ounces. I know I said earlier, 1 kilo was the maximum allowance, but they really wanted it under 30 ounces if they could. This one hits 28 unloaded. It's right on the size spec, 7.1 inches. To do that, they shortened the barrel to 3.6 inches, which was still enough to get 25 meters. And overall height is 5.1. It actually uses a modified version of the P38 mag. They added a secondary notch in the back for a revised mag catch back here. It's a little more streamlined for that, pull and weight, what have you. Of course, it's still single, double action. It has the serrated trigger and all that, adjustable sights. Yeah, Walther pretty much got these into production first. By 1977, the line was up and running. By 1978, they were able to offer these, and they were reasonably successful. They built 100,000 total P5s, with the majority going to police. Now, a big chunk were actually exported to the Dutch. Sources argue exactly how many the Dutch police got, but tens of thousands more would go to various local, state, federal police agencies. For example, the German Railway Authority had some of these. The border guards, the investigators had some, different ones could pick. And many did. Walther was a known name. But, the P5 was looking a little dated. And it was a little spendy. Not the most expensive, it was in the middle. So some made a more economical choice. Sweaty. And this is where in the video I start to disappoint you, because I do not have a P6. I don't even have a P225. Sorry. I remember when they were coming in the gun shop I worked at. Really good condition and very affordable with lots of kit. I just never happened to keep one and take one home. Don't really regret it, because all the Sig Sauer P22 series are pretty much the same iteration. In fact, originally, the new partnership between J.P. Sauer and Sig of Neuhausen, Switzerland, submitted this gun. Now, I should mention that when I say partnership, it's true they worked together in 1975, but basically Switzerland bought a controlling interest in J.P. Sauer in Eckerford, Germany. So, yeah, but this really helped them out because they could export more easily because of Swiss laws of neutrality. It also meant they were well positioned, being made technically within West Germany for the police trials, so you don't have to really import the guns. Cool. They originally just submitted the P220 and 9mm, and it had most of what they wanted. A double single action with decocker control. It had the accuracy. It could definitely do the 10,000 rounds, no problem. But it was a little big, little long in both dimensions, and a little not heavy. It is an alloy frame, but they could do better. So after this was kind of like, hey, we like what you're doing, but shrink it down, kind of like what Walther is doing. That's where we get the 225, and I don't have one of those. Of course, I do have a 228, which is essentially a double stack version of a 225 with the shortened barrel, shortened grip. The 225 had an 8-shot mag. This is, of course, 13. So, you know, I've got the two guns right around it. The only other major difference, the P6 had a redesigned hammer. Literally, like, the physical hammer was different for police use, but other than that, the same size as this. And that got it right in about 6.9 inches front to back. It was a little tall still at about 5.2, but they let it slide. And weight, again, was pretty much the same as the Walther, you know, 27, 28, 29 ounces unloaded, give or take. You know, these are all alloy framed guns. The 225 was accepted, and production began just right after the Walther, 1978, and by the end of that year, in 1979, these were on offer to police departments, and they were the cheapest. Yeah, the P6 was the cheapest offering. Keep in mind, when Sig Sauer designed this, that was the idea. They were using modern CNC technology. They were using cutting-edge manufacturing tech to make these. Sam Colt would have been proud. So they were kind of able to outstrip Karl Walther, Germany, because they were using more traditional methods. That'll kind of come back to bite them in the butt later with the P88. So if you imagine just a slightly skinnier version of this, tens of thousands were sold to various German police agencies, and based on the surplus ones we saw, yeah, they did really well. 7 local state agencies used these. The Berlin police actually had several tens of thousands, kind of replacing their older P1s and P4s that they had. And a lot of these will stay in service into the 21st century. It's a very effective, a very good gun. And, you know, I'm showing off the compact version from Sig Sauer from the 80s, so, you know, I gotta do right by my Walther. Fast forwarding a full decade, right as they're trying to get the P88 ready for market, they do release the P5 Compact, the P5C here. So 1987. I'm only having it in this video because these were purchased in small numbers by certain police departments within West Germany for issue to, like, detectives and higher ranking people, criminal investigators. It's just a little bit smaller. It goes from a 7.1 inch barrel down to about a 6.7, 6.8. The grip's about the same overall length, but it does have some kind of more rounded edges. It does have a new style of mag catch, more Browning style. Everything's more rounded on this. The barrel is down to 3.1 inches, so we lose about half an inch there with a lot of that coming out of the slide. It's just a more rounded gun, even more bobbed hammer. Most famously, these were used by the English. I think about 3,000 of the total production of only 10,000 went up there, but a few hundred did go to German police. So I thought, yeah, what the hey, might as well mention it since we showed off the not correct Sig. Many more of the full size, be it Dutch or German, were available. Pretty cool gun. I've done videos in the past on it. You might check them out. Of course, there is one more P-Series gun you're thinking of. What do you know, it works. If you were disappointed by me not having a P6, you're going to be outright let down because I just don't have a P7, a PSP. Not that kind of PSP, the original, the good one. Heckler Koch submittal. They were actually maybe the last to get going. By 1976, they were working on a design, and it was pretty much a clean sheet design. That's why it wasn't in production until 1979, halfway through the year, and then it was available. It really was the one that tried to go ambi, mostly succeeded. It's innovative because it kept on the blowback system. It had the gas piston, though, to retard the slide going back, kind of acting as a bolt. It had the squeeze cocker, a la the old lemon squeezer from Smith & Wesson. It's an interesting design, it really is, and it met the criteria leaps and bounds because it had a fixed barrel, unlike the Sig and the Walther, where the the barrel on the Sig tips up and down. The Walther, it slides back and forth on the wedge. The HK was fixed, and it was longer, over 4 inches. At the same time, the gun was short. It was 6.5 inches, so by far the shortest. It was even shorter in the vertical too, about 5 inches. Same capacity as the rest. 8 shots originally, not counting the later M13. Yeah, so why don't I have one? Now, we have featured it in videos on the channel over the years. HK started out with the PSP, the police service pistol. That became the P7. That had the original mag release and didn't have the heat shield. Later they would go to the P7 M8, which is personally kind of my favorite. I like the paddle style mag release, which of course would be carried over later to this and the Walthers. And it does have the heat shield. Second mag.
Pretty clean.
And very hot right here. And of course the P7 M13 was just a high cap version of the M8. And then, yes, there was the M10 as well in 40. So I know them. I've had hands on all of them. I remember when the police ones were coming in along with the P5s and a little before the P6s. It's a cost thing. They were always a little more money. And even if I had one, it's one of those things where people want them more than I want to keep them. It's just the money they're going for. If you have them and are happy, cool. I'm happy for you. I've known guys who collect P7s and are tickled to death with them. And we all had to kind of pick our battles, and I just tend to like Walthers and Sigs a little more. And that was kind of mirrored in the German police too. The P7 was by far the most expensive by 1980. So while it was well liked and saw some service with GSG-9, some select units of the Bundeswehr even picked up some, like the KSK. You did see like Bavarian police had some, Saxony had some. It was probably the one that sold, in strict terms, the smallest number. Not to say overall, commercially, it was a success. But HK wasn't the known company in the 1970s that they were starting to make a name. And, of course, they had just got full rights to the G3, and the MP5 was kicking off for them. So they were rising. But, the 80s still had to come. And the PSP did have some shortcomings. Some didn't like the squeeze cocker. And... the direct blowback, even if it was retarded by a piston, could be unpleasant to some. Your mileage may vary. So, of the three, it probably got the least success, even if it was maybe the best, you could argue. Now, you might be asking, what about Mauser? They also submitted a pistol called the HSP, I believe. Of the 4 main companies to submit in 1976, they were the only one to be knocked out. Their design was just not felt to be durable enough. It didn't last the 10,000 round endurance test, and that was the minimum requirement. Like, each individual pistol had to be able to go 10,000 rounds without a major repair or replacement. Otherwise, they're not buying them. So they got knocked out. But Walther P5, Sig Sauer P6, Heckler Koch P7, those were what the Germans could choose in the 1980s. And of course, Bundeswehr still getting P1s, although it is finally getting long in the tooth.
Good.
And that's where this gun, the P8, technically this is a P8A1, comes into play in 1994 based on the USP. So I do have at least this HK. I get credit for that, right? Not to mention these are like half the price of a used P7. But that's kind of a story for our next video. We'll talk about the Bundeswehr and changing police requirements in the 90s and post-Cold War era. Decocker. Start off on double action. Ending with them all lined up. Again, sorry for the lighting. It's that time of day. And this is one of those days where it can't decide if it wants to be sunny or cloudy. So yeah, beginning with the P1s, be it the early or the late, be it military or police, retroactively just the name given on paper as early as 57 on the guns. For the military in 63, the police guns will still be marked P38, even with alloy frames. That's why we've had the surplus P38s in. The P2 and P3, you can easily find West German P3s, Astra guns that were reworked by them. They were pretty easy to tell. They would re-blue some. They would actually add serials to some parts, giving them their stampings. But P2s, good luck. I've handled one in my life. Yes, it was for sale. No, I could not afford it. Oh well. And then moving on to the kind of interim offerings by Walther, the P4, and really this should have been called the P4K, but it did see police use and even limited military. And then my attempted with the P5 and P5 Compact to squeeze it in. Hopefully it worked. One of my favorite guns. This is an original I've had since these were first surplused out back in 2004, I believe. Came with the holster and everything. And then me not having a P6, oopsie, but I got these. And then me really not having a P7, yeah, that's totally on me. But can you blame me with the costs? And then next time, yeah, we'll go more modern. Talk about the adoption of the P8, the transition to the P8A1, and then talk about why the P14 was actually adopted before the P13, and honestly the confusion with the name P13. Was it the HK P30? Yeah, next time we'll talk about it. Not to mention the P9, P10, P11, P12, blah blah blah. Anyway, I appreciate you tuning in. As always, if you could, like, share, subscribe. Definitely comment, let me know what you think. And if you'd really like to help support us, again, I pretty much did this video because of Patreon's request. Go over there to Patreon and check us out. This is Misha, also on behalf of Peanut. We'll catch you very soon next time.